Welcome to the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for June through September. Over the last 30 days, we've seen warm temperatures, especially over the southern two-thirds of the Great Basin. We even had a very hot period through the end of May with record temperatures during the last week. Precipitation has been very dry over the southern two-thirds of the basin. We have had some wetter conditions over the last 30 days in the north, and actually over the last 2 weeks, some fairly wet conditions across Idaho into far northern Nevada. Looking at the precipitation since the beginning of the water year, October 2019, and you can see again very dry conditions generally across the basin, or at least below normal conditions. We did see some near normal precipitation in the far north and also above normal precipitation. The only area would be in the far south over southern Nevada, the Arizona Strip, and southwest Utah. However, we also had a wet 2018-2019 period, as you can see, well above normal precipitation for the water year, going into last fire season, especially across Nevada and Utah and the Arizona Strip. So this is important because this will show our carryover grass situation, and we do have carryover grasses to deal with over many areas of Nevada and Utah and down into Arizona. Our snowpack is really not a factor. Things are melting off fairly rapidly, especially due to the heat we saw at the end of May. Soil moisture has decreased significantly across the Great Basin and is very low across parts of California and the Sierra Front, and also into parts of northeast Nevada and across Utah. Looking at our evaporative demand drought index, you can see how drought has intensified over the last couple of weeks, especially across Nevada and Utah, and this is largely due to the very hot and dry conditions we saw towards the end of May. Looking at our longer-term drought monitor, we still have drought in place, generally severe drought or moderate drought across parts of Nevada into Utah, and mostly moderate drought with just pockets of severe drought. And then we do have some drought conditions north up into Idaho as well. Looking at some of our current ERC conditions, you can see from the map up north across Idaho, our ERCs have been increasing but are still well below the 80th or 90th percentile for the time of year, but they are above normal. Further south, however, we've seen more of a rapid increase in ERCs across Nevada and Utah due to the very hot conditions. And although some areas are not quite reaching the 90th percentile, they are well above normal and near records for the time of year across many parts of Utah and into parts of Nevada. Looking at some of our live fuel moisture, our sagebrush has reached its peak and has been trending downward and is generally below normal across Nevada and Utah for the time of year and closer to normal further north across Idaho. If we look a little bit more at our fuel situation, we do have our 100-hour fuel moisture, which shows generally very dry conditions over parts of southern and eastern Nevada into western Utah, and then more moderate conditions as you move further north. Looking at some of our 1,000-hour fuels, again, we're seeing those drier conditions in the south. However, it's our grasses, which are very dry over the southern half of the Great Basin, which has been driving a lot of our fire spread early this season. Looking at some of our grass fuel loading, these are some experimental models that were run last July. You can see from the bottom picture, this is the percent of normal grass crop, and you can see things are far above average over the southern half of the Great Basin, and last year were still above average, but only about 20 to 50% above average over northern areas of the Great Basin. Then if we look at 2019, kind of looking at some comparisons from last year going into this year, our grass situation, you can see the above normal and the greens and blues over southern areas of Nevada into southwest Utah. And then looking at 2020, you can see again how that above normal precipitation in the south has perpetuated additional grass growth in addition to what we saw last year. So we have had some references to 2005, and looking at the map that this experimental product would have issued in 2005, you can see the stark difference in 2005 and what we're seeing this year. However, again, this year does not take into account what we saw last year, so we still are looking at a combination of those last two maps, and again, still not quite what we saw in 2005, but definitely well above normal for fine fuel growth for this time of year, at least compared to what we would normally see. So now that we've looked at all the past conditions, we'll put everything together for what we are looking at down the line. And looking at El Nino and La Nina, some projections, currently we are in a state of neutral, and we've been in neutral for quite some time, so sea surface temperatures are not exceptionally warm or cold. However, as we go through time, you can see kind of a general downward trend of these lines, and each line is just a different model forecast for sea surface temperatures. So right now it looks like we're going to be trending towards some cooler water later in the summer and towards fall. Whether we'll really reach into La Nina or not remains to be determined, but we definitely are seeing more of a cooling trend as we go through the year, and we will see how that might impact some of our weather. Looking at the 8 to 14 day outlook, taking us from June 8th to June 14th, and we are looking at cooler conditions over the northern half of the Great Basin and possibly some drier conditions as we move towards the middle of the month. However, starting the month in early June, we will likely see a fairly cold system move across the Great Basin and also bring some wet weather to the northern half of the Great Basin. So this will give us a temporary reprieve from some of the active fire conditions we did see towards the end of May, and we will have fairly quieter conditions, a little bit more lightning activity, so likely more initial attack, but we will see some moisture and much cooler temperatures throughout the first week to 10 days of June, and then we will start to see conditions dry out again. If we look at our monthly outlooks, taking us for the next 4 months, you can see we are again looking at generally warm conditions across the Great Basin through much of the next 4 months, but we are seeing more of a drier pattern maybe in the southern areas and possibly those wetter conditions at least through the early part of June, which would be indicated by not showing that exceptionally dry trend in the north. However, as we get towards mid to late May, it looks like things may turn towards the drier, warmer scenario, and we will see more of a rapid curing out of our fuels throughout the month of June. So once we enter July, we are looking for warm and dry conditions over especially the western and northern half of the Great Basin. The monsoon might start near normal this year or maybe a slight delay, but will likely be pushed a little bit further to the east. So it may only start impacting southeast Utah initially, so we are looking for drier conditions to remain over the rest of Utah, at least early in the monsoon season. Then once we move towards August, we may see a little bit more monsoon activity traditionally where we would normally see it, which would be across Utah and possibly into eastern Nevada, but still those drier conditions continuing over the western and northern side of the Great Basin. And that dryness does continue on the west side throughout September. So now that we've looked at our past weather and fuel conditions and what we are currently expecting, we'll go into our outlook. So for the month of June, we are still looking at above normal conditions over the southern half of the Great Basin. Again, with that cooler and wetter system coming through for the first week to 10 days of June in the north, that should knock down some of our recent uptick in fire activity due to lightning in the north. So we will see a little reprieve over the first week or so of June in the north, and again, still expecting the conditions to remain above normal for fire potential in the south. However, once we get to later in June and towards July is when things really should start to pick up for more of a longer period of time across the Great Basin, and we are looking for a large area of above normal activity for a couple different reasons. One, for the carryover grasses and the drying out of our new grasses, and also the drying out of our sagebrush across Nevada, Idaho, and northern Utah. And then if the monsoon does not push north as quickly or develop as early in July, we will see those above normal conditions continue across Utah, because that would be around the time that we would see a little bit more moderating of our fire conditions. So if we don't see that, then we do anticipate that above normal fire potential to linger further into July. By August, we should see a reprieve over southern areas as we do see some moisture move in, but we will continue to remain hot and dry and on the edge of monsoon moisture over northern and western areas, so we could see more pulses of lightning activity that would not be quite as wet skirt the northern and western areas, along with breezy conditions at times. So again, that above normal condition will continue in August and likely continue into September if we don't see appreciable moisture over the western side of the Great Basin. This would be when we would start seeing our fall cold fronts move in, so an increase in wind, possibly an increase in natural starts as well, moving into the month of September. That concludes our monthly briefing for today. Check back next month for the latest updates.